History has many villains. Some wear crowns, some wear uniforms. And then there are those who wear lab coats and insist they are doing research. This is the story of Josef Mengele, a man who wanted desperately to be remembered as a brilliant scientist and instead became a synonym for cruelty, cowardice, and catastrophic misuse of education. If evil had a resume, Mengele's will look impressive at first glance. Doctorate? Check. Academic pedigree? Check. Moral compass? Absolutely not. Josef Mengele was born on March 16, 1911, in the Bavarian town of Günzburg, Germany. This is important because nothing about his childhood suggests his destiny, prophecy, or evil vibes. No dark omens, no cursed village, no dramatic lightning strikes. He grew up in a comfortable, middle-class Catholic family. His father owned a successful agricultural machinery business. Young Joseph wanted for nothing, which immediately ruins any attempt to explain his future behavior with hardship. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't uneducated. He wasn't marginalized. He has a normal life, a very good childhood, and that makes everything that follows much worse. Mengele was smart, unfortunately. He studied philosophy, anthropology, medicine at respected German universities, including Munich and Frankfurt. This is where we need to pause and make something very clear. Education does not equal ethics. Mengele earned not one but two doctorates, one in anthropology and one in medicine, which proves that you can be academically brilliant and still fail every test that matters. His early academic work focused on racial differences, a topic that was already sliding into dangerous territory thanks to the Nazi ideology masquerading as science. Instead of questioning this framework, Mengele leaned into it hard, very hard. Germany in the 1930s was a perfect storm: economic collapse, national humiliation after World War I, and a political movement promising simple answers to complex problems. Enter the Nazi Party with its pseudoscience, racial obsessions, and talent for turning prejudice into policy. Mengele didn't resist this. He embraced it. He joined the Nazi Party in 1937, the SS shortly after, not under pressure, not reluctantly, enthusiastically. Because for an ambitious young academic, Nazis offered something intoxicating: funding, status, and permission. Permission to pursue ideas that should have been buried under ethics committees and common decency. One of the most important influences on Mengele's career was Ottmar von Verschuer, a prominent racial hygienist and eugenicist. Verschuer believed that genetics explained everything: intelligence, morality, worth. Mengele became his star pupil. If Verschuer planted the ideological seeds, Mengele watered them with obsession. Twins, heredity, physical differences. This became Mengele's academic fixation. This interest might have led to cautious, ethical research. In Nazi Germany, it led to nightmares. World War II broke out, and Mengele joined the Waffen-SS as a medical officer. Initially, he served on the Eastern Front. And here is something often overlooked: he wasn't a coward in combat. He was decorated for bravery after rescuing soldiers from a burning tank, which makes what comes later even more disturbing, because courage in battle does not translate into humanity of it at all. After being wounded, Mengele was deemed unfit for frontline service. Instead of being sidelined, he was reassigned. In 1943, he arrived at Auschwitz. This was not a punishment, it was a promotion. Auschwitz was not just a camp, it was a system, a factory of death disguised as bureaucracy, and Mengele fitted right in. At Auschwitz, Mengele became famous for his role on the selection ramp. This is where arriving prisoners were divided: those sent to forced labor and those sent directly to the gas chambers. Mengele often stood there in pristine uniform, performing what survivors describe as casual, almost bored gestures. A flick of the wrist to the left, a flick to the right. Life and death, decided with less thought than choosing a seat on a bus. And they seemed to enjoy it, not with rage, not with shouting, but with calm. That's the part that chills historians. A real psychopath without remorse, a real monster in uniform. This is an example of how humans can become monsters and what ideology can do. Start seeing other humans as simple lab rats. Prisoners soon gave Mengele a nickname, a very suggestive one, the Angel of Death. Not because he was mysterious, but because he was omnipresent, especially when children were involved, especially twins. Anyone who caught up his attention as interested, which in Mengele's vocabulary was never a good thing. Survivors later recalled something deeply unsettling. Mengele could be charming. He smiled, he spoke gently, he sometimes gave candy to children and then sent them to their deaths, or worse, to his experiments. This wasn't sadism fueled by rage, it was sadism wrapped in manners, and that made resistance harder. At Auschwitz, Mengele finally had what he wanted: unlimited human subjects, no oversight, total authority. What he did not resemble real science. No proper methodology, no meaningful conclusions, just torture with footnotes. He justified it all by invoking futurist knowledge. By 1943 and 1944, Josef Mengele had reached the peak of his power, respected by the SS, feared by prisoners, protected by the system. The stage was set. By the time he fully settled into his role at Auschwitz, he had achieved every unethical scientist's dream: zero accountability, a regime actively cheering him on. Mengele liked to call what he did in research. If peer review had existed in Auschwitz, his work would have been rejected in under 5 seconds, possibly thrown out of the window, followed by the reviewer. Mengele's obsession with twins became legendary. Why twins? Because Nazi racial ideology believed twins could unlock secret of heredity, racial purity, and mass reproduction of ideal germs, which is already horrifying. But Mengele took it further. Whenever a transport arrived, he would shout for twins. Children who raised their hands were pulled aside. Sometimes they thought they were being saved. They were not. Twin children were often housed separately from other prisoners. Compared to the rest of Auschwitz, they were better fed, sometimes allowed to keep their clothes, occasionally spared immediate death, which sounds merciful, until you realize this wasn't kindness. It was inventory management. They were not prisoners, they were specimens. Let's be very clear. None of Mengele's experiments met basic scientific standards. What he did include injecting chemicals into children's eyes to change eye color, deliberately infecting twins with disease, amputations without anesthesia, killing one twin to compare organs with the surviving sibling. This was not research. This was brutality dressed up in academic language. Even by the standards of the time, it was recognized as excessive. Yes, even by the Nazis, which should tell you something. Here's where the part Mengele would hate the most. His work produced nothing of value, no breakthroughs, no usable medical insights, no contributions to genetics, just suffering. Historians and medical professionals who later reviewed his notes found sloppy documentation, no consistent hypotheses. In short, he tortured people for nothing. One of the most disturbing aspects of Mengele's work was his focus on children, especially twins, children with physical differences, children with dwarfism or disabilities. Why? Because they were easier to control. Survivors recalled how Mengele would speak softly to children, promising, "Don't worry, this won't hurt." It often did, terribly. Unlike some camp doctors who tried to stay invisible, Mengele was theatrical. He whistled classical music, wore immaculate uniforms. The contrast was deliberate. Cruelty feels more powerful when he wears a smile. Mengele didn't limit himself. He also conducted blood transfusion experiments, starvation studies. Sometimes he collaborated with other SS doctors, sometimes acted alone, always without mercy. When a subject was no longer useful, they were discarded, often via gas chambers, direct execution, then dissected. Again, this is not science, just systematic dehumanization. Here's something rarely discussed. Mengele occasionally clashed with camp administrators, not because he was too cruel, but because his experiments interfered with labor quotas. His subjects weren't efficiency workers. I don't think it's very easy to work after passing through all those experiments. By late 1944, the war was collapsing for Nazi Germany. The Red Army advanced. Allied bombers dominated the skies. Auschwitz was no longer secure. Mengele, sensing the music was about to stop, did what many Nazis did in best. He ran. By the time Auschwitz was evacuated in January 1945, Mengele destroyed documents, abandoned his quote-unquote research, and disappeared into the chaos. The angel of death was suddenly very interested in self-preservation. Funny how morality never stopped him, but defeat absolutely did. Unlike many high-ranking Nazis, Mengele wasn't captured immediately. Why? Because he wasn't famous yet. To the Allies, he was just another SS doctor. No international manhunt, no dramatic arrest. Just a man blending into the sea of defeated Germany, which he did it with impressive cowardice. After the war, Mengele lived under false names. At one point, he was detained by Allied forces and released. Why? Because he wasn't recognized. His name didn't trigger alarms yet. History's most wanted monsters often escape, not because they are clever, but because systems are slow. Mengele exploited that beautifully. Like many Nazis, Mengele uses escape networks, often called red lines, to flee Europe. Exactly like Adolf Eichmann. We already had a video about him here in the channel, and I will leave here on the card. With help from former SS contacts, sympathizers, and people who preferred money over conscience, he made his way to Italy, then South America. Because if you are fleeing injustice in the late 1940s, South America was basically the default setting. Mengele arrived in Argentina in 1949. At a time, the country was surprisingly welcoming to former Nazis. He lived under his real name for a while, which tells you something about how confident he felt. He worked in business, pharmaceutical sales, odd jobs, no experiments, no lab coat. Just a man who once played God, now struggling with paperwork. Even in hiding, Mengele remained arrogant. He maintained contact with family in Germany, received financial support, believed he did eventually return home. He didn't see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as misunderstood, which is villain speak for "I regret nothing." In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the world finally caught up. War crimes trials, survivor testimonies, public outrage. Names once buried under documents became famous, and suddenly Josef Mengele wasn't anonymous anymore. He was notorious. Once his name became public, Mengele panicked. He fled Argentina, then Paraguay, then Brazil, always moving, always paranoid, always looking over his shoulder. Gone was the man in spotless uniforms. Now he was nervous, isolated. Power evaporates fast when accountability shows up. Mengele's later life was miserable. He lived in modest homes, relied on Nazi sympathizers, grew increasingly isolated. No research, no recognition, no audience. Just a man haunted by the knowledge that the world knew who he was, which frankly is still too gentle a punishment. Let's destroy a myth right now. Mengele was not a brilliant scientist undone by politics. He was a mediocre academic, an enthusiastic ideologue. His so-called genius produced nothing lasting, no discoveries, no medical advance, no respected legacy, just trauma. In 1979, Josef Mengele drowned while swimming in Brazil. No trial, no courtroom, no sentencing, just a quiet death under assumed name. History rarely offers poetic justice. This was one of those cases. Though he escaped legal punishment, Mengele did not escape history. His name became synonymous with medical crimes, Nazi pseudoscience, absolute moral failure, and pure evil. Every ethics course references him. Every warning about science without humanity points directly at him, which is, perhaps, the only legacy he truly earned. Despite everything he believed, Mengele proved the opposite of his ideology. He showed that education doesn't prevent evil, intelligence doesn't guarantee morality, systems enable monsters when unchecked, and that cruelty, wrapped in credentials, is still cruelty. By the end of his life, Josef Mengele was alone, forgotten by allies, remembered only for his crimes. Not a mastermind, not a misunderstood genius, just a man who used power to hurt the powerless, and ran when the bill came due. Josef Mengele died without standing trial. That fact alone frustrates historians, survivors, and anyone who believes in justice. But history had its own courtroom, and its verdict was unanimous. No appeal, no parole. After his death, investigations finally confirmed what many already suspected. The myth of the escaped mastermind collapsed into something far less impressive. A paranoid man, living off handouts, terrified of being recognized, just a shrinking shadow of someone who once thought himself untouchable. In the 1980s, forensic teams exhumed remains believed to be Mengele's. DNA analysis later confirmed it, and with that, the last mystery disappeared. If Mengele's life story feels unsatisfying, that's because it isn't the main story. The real story belongs to the survivors, those who lived with trauma, testified despite unimaginable pain. Many twin survivors later spoke publicly, not for revenge, but for memory. They refused to let his name eclipse their humanity. That's power. Remembering Josef Mengele is uncomfortable. It should be. History isn't a museum of heroes, it's a warning system, and memory is how we keep it working. That's why history is important. Remember the past to never commit the same mistakes in the future. Hello, my friend. My name is Mike, and I am the lay historian. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Josef Mengele wasn't captured by justice, but Adolf Eichmann was. If you want to see how this happened, see this video about Adolf Eichmann, the most bureaucrat criminal in human history. I see you there. Ciao.